Aloha, welcome to the Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking. My name is Lonnie, and I'm an AARP Hawaii volunteer. I'll be your host tonight. Tonight we'll be making Turkish stuffed eggplant. For those who like meat, you'll make karnıyarık, which includes ground beef. For those who prefer vegetarian, you'll be making iman bielda. I apologize if I mispronounced those. On behalf of our sponsors, Kaunoa Senior Services on Maui, Ua Leaf Cafe at Windward Community College, and AARP Hawaii, welcome. For those of you who are new or who may be unfamiliar with AARP Hawaii, we are a membership organization for people 50 and older, but what we do for everyone. We hope that with this series, you can learn some techniques that you can use to build or maintain a healthy lifestyle. Let's do a quick bit of housekeeping. This is a picture of what you would see at the bottom of your screen on a PC and possibly the top of the screen on your iPad. Everybody is in mute. If you want to submit a question or comment, please click on the button that says Q&A and type in your question. I will be monitoring the questions and making sure they get asked. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you may type your questions in the comments. We are not using the raise hand button. The chat feature can be used if you want to make a comment to everyone or to communicate a technical question. We recommend that you select speaker side by side rather than gallery view for this presentation. To do this by clicking on the upper right part of your screen. Once you're in that view, then just simply click and drag on the middle bar. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Chef Daniel Swift, who will be leading us through this cooking series. Take it away.
Boom, boom. That work?
Yes.
See me?
We can see you and hear you.
I realize I need a haircut as I look at myself there. All right, thanks, Lonnie. Appreciate that. Welcome back, everybody. It's Eggplant tonight, and you did great pronouncing them because I'm no better at these complicated words. But we're talking about two different approaches to utilizing the filling for a stuffed eggplant. I'm going to do the hamburger or the meat version, which is karnıyarık, if that's pronounced right. I apologize. But you can also, of course, make this vegetarian. At the bottom of the recipe that we sent out, if you got that, has some of the options that you might utilize for filling. But quite honestly, any type of filling that you wanted to use would be fine. The ingredients that we're going to use tonight are really similar to a lot of the ingredients we've used as we've gone throughout the Mediterranean. And the spices are oftentimes what really makes the difference. So tonight we're using some allspice, which I think we've used once before, but it's sort of a standalone spice tonight, aside from the chili flakes that would go in to give a little bit of heat also. But I think that this one gives it a little bit of a sort of earthy type of taste, and it really makes it kind of homey. It's perfect with the beef or with the vegetables. So that being said, I guess, so for eggplant, this is sort of a love-hate type of vegetable, or actually it's a fruit. I've got some pointers here. I'll talk about it here in a second. I was trying to find, yesterday was really busy, so I could only go to one store, and they only had the Aloon Farms locally grown, basically large version of a Japanese eggplant. It looks like it to me, but I was hoping to get sort of the bulbous ones, the one that looks like a light bulb. They're a lot larger, a little bit darker purple, probably closer to this color, because you have a little bit more flesh to it. And if you're stuffing your eggplant, it helps to have that little bit extra central portion to hold the filling as you do it. But the ones we're doing tonight will work out just fine. It's just a little bit longer, of course, and a little bit thinner. These larger ones work fine for that. So as I mentioned, it is a fruit. A lot of people I know don't like eggplant. They don't like the texture. They don't like the slight bitterness of the skin. But there are a lot of really different and useful purposes for the fruit, whether it's a main course, an addition to what we're doing tonight, or baba ganoush, I think we talked about last week, which is like a version of hummus made with it. Lots of different options. So it sort of just depends on how you prepare it. But it is a fruit. The skin can be thick. Usually the Japanese style eggplant, the longer, slender, skinny one is, I find the skin to be a little bit thinner. A lot of the larger bulbous ones, the skin can be thick. Now, there's nothing wrong with peeling it if you want to do that. Keep in mind that it does oxidize really quickly. So you want to soak it in salt water, which we'll do today and talk about that as you're preparing it, so it doesn't get too oxidized. But if you're browning it, honestly, it probably doesn't matter that much. So depends on the use that you're planning for it. The pulp is really spongy. It kind of, in a way, honestly, it kind of reminds me of breadfruit or ulu, in that it's when it's closer to the ripe stage, it'll absorb a lot of liquid, and it sometimes is substituted as a protein in a main course if it's cubed up, those sorts of things. So it, in a way, to me, is a little bit similar to that. I find it to be slightly bitter a little bit, especially the peel, but some people like that. I'm not a huge bitter guy, so it's probably my least favorite taste of all the tastes that we have: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. Sweet's number one, which I'm trying to avoid a little bit. So keep that in mind. I mean, a pinch of sugar or a sweetener in a dish like this can round it out. And it's not in this particular recipe, but if you make it and find that it has a slight bitterness to it, then you can make that adjustment on your own. It's very absorbent. As I mentioned, it'll pull in a lot of liquid, so that's part of why we soak it in the salt water as well. And then I find it to be really versatile for lots of different dishes and items that you can create with it. So the ingredients that we have for tonight's dish, I'll turn my pan on here really quick, are pretty straightforward. I'll show you how to like split and score and soak this particular eggplant here. And then we've got some diced bell peppers. Here I did a green bell and a red bell. Price is going up, I can say. Wow, and if you've been shopping, then you notice, I think it was like $3.69 a pound for those. I've got some onion, some diced already. I'll finish the dice of the other one. It calls for a tomato, a nice diced tomato. I also, and you know, if you watch the show, I am a huge fan of canned diced tomatoes. So I do have a fresh one, but I'm also going to use one of my favorite canned tomatoes, which has some of that garlic and herbs and stuff already in it. And that will blend perfectly with what we're doing tonight. Now we've got some garlic, the olive oil, salt, pepper, chili flake it calls for in the recipe. I had a bird chili, Hawaiian bird chili, so I chopped that up. It was fresh. I wanted to use it, but a little something to give it some heat. If you don't want the heat, then you can pull that out. Totally up to you. A little tomato paste, that allspice that we talked about, some fresh herbs. We've got parsley chopped already, and mint I will chop up when we get closer to the end. And then because we're doing the meat one, I'm using lean ground beef tonight. You could certainly also use a turkey or chicken, or if you wanted to do a vegetarian version, you could get a firm tofu, drain it, and just crumble it up, and that would work. I would probably put it in at the end, but you could use tofu for that. And then in the veggie mix that I have, I didn't list cabbage, but if you're trying to steer clear of meats and you want that hearty body to your dishes, chopped cabbage holds its shape really well, and this would work perfect in this particular dish. So a couple alternatives for you. I'll turn that down a little bit. I have a little bit of water. I may or may not need it because I'm adding the tomato juice, or excuse me, the canned tomato that has some liquid in it. I might not need the water that's in the recipe, but I'm going to set it here on the side just in case. Because what I did earlier when I made this is I ended up actually having to reduce some of that moisture, which is perfectly normal for what we're doing. So really quick, here's the eggplant that's been soaking in some salt water. And this just kind of hydrates it a little bit. Like I said, they're super absorbent. This will pull a little flavor into it. And I'll show you how to score it. But what I'm going to do for now is just take this out and put it on a paper towel upside down and let it drain a little bit. So that's just salted like the ocean. The salinity, I don't know what percentage that is, but anytime I'm blanching or using salt water, I tend to make it about as salty as it is when you jump in the ocean here. So the next thing we're going to do here is just cut the top off to get this prepped and remove that. And then I'm going to split it lengthwise. And remember, if this were one of the larger ones, you'd just do the same exact process. So we split it open. It's got this nice white flesh. You know, it is related to the tomato, so it's one of those one of those fruits that we sometimes think is a vegetable that we can slice and eat. The seeds are edible, the skin's edible, all of that. So what we do is score it, and I think I put paring knife on your recipe, but you can also use a French knife. And all we're doing is running some cuts through the flesh. We don't want to go all the way through the skin. We want that skin to hold itself together to be the vessel for the filling. So I'm just kind of going it 3/4 of the way through in a crosshatch diamond, like on a grilled steak or something, pattern, and make it kind of like that. And you can see, look at, we cut this, what, a minute ago, and it's already oxidizing. It's already turning brown. So I'm going to put that in the water, and these do float. You see it bouncing around, which is why I had weight. I just used a glass jar, set it on top. That'll sort of hold it under water and let it absorb that liquid. So our pan's nice and hot, probably too hot. We'll see. I'm going to throw in the onions and the peppers first. Let me just
Chef?
finish. Yeah, go ahead.
I do have a question about the water for people from Jenny. For people on low salt diets, can you skip the salt in the water?
You can, yes. And if you're using the larger ones, it'll probably be fine. What that does is, you know, just imparts some of the liquid into the eggplant. But yeah, you could absolutely leave that out if you're staying away from sodium.
And if you're using salt as the ocean, is there a specific ratio of salt to the water?
I used to know the percentage, actually. Someone might, who's watching tonight, maybe they can chime in. I can't remember what the percentage is, but it's like 5 or less, I believe, if I recall. But just, you know, it should taste a little bit salty. So one of the challenges a lot of people have when they blanch things or when they're using salt water is they don't put enough salt in it. If you're cooking pasta, you have to have enough sodium in there to impart a little bit of flavor into the pasta itself. Now, if you're watching your salt intake, then obviously you've grown accustomed to things being less salty. Pardon the noise, but you're not going to do that. But traditionally in a restaurant or when we're cooking regular service style food, we always want to have the salt about the equivalent of the ocean when you're doing blanching and water. So I'm sure someone will tune in with the ratio of that.
Sure. And you know, I have a viewer that's wanting to find out, can you use the rounder oval shaped eggplant instead of the long ones?
Yeah, that is the one, as I mentioned earlier, that we would be using tonight. The recipe would call for that. They don't use the Japanese style a lot in the Middle East, but I couldn't find it at the store that I was at. So yes, absolutely, especially if you're stuffing it. It's a little hard to stuff a skinny little one like this, but we're going to do our best. So you can see it's softened up a little bit. This is one that I soaked earlier for about 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and it opened up a touch, didn't discolor. And now this would then be roasted. You want to drain all the liquid off so it's upside down, pull that liquid out, and then this would get roasted. And when it's done, we're just trying to get a little bit of brown on it. So that's a little bit warm. So you can see that it's browned up, it's cooked the skin a little bit, it's nice and soft, and this will be what we add the filling to once the filling's ready. So I'm just gonna set that to the side. And come back to this over here. So really we're just sweating the onions and the peppers, making them a little bit tender. A couple minutes is fine. And then we can go in with our hamburger, in this case, our lean ground beef. And do you have any other questions at the moment?
Just one, I can, let's see, Cheryl Ann, she wants to know if she can substitute the parsley for fresh cilantro.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep, Joanne, you can indeed. And that would be actually really tasty. I have a bunch of cilantro at home. That would be really nice in this particular dish. I'm going to actually add it all. It might take a little longer to cook, but we'll get that all in there. And that's what I would encourage you to do. We try to do that every week, is come up with ways that we can utilize the ingredients that we have here available to us, but also substitute. So in this case, maybe you prefer cilantro, or you want to throw in a little oregano, or you'd rather throw in, so even some rosemary. It doesn't matter. If you've got it growing, green onions would be great in this. There's just so many different things that you could do. Even on the eggplant side of things, if you find that you don't like the skin on the eggplant, or you don't want to take the time to stuff it and then roast it back and forth into the oven, you could easily just peel and cube your eggplant and cook it right in here with everything. So almost like a hamburger helper. And if you look at the ingredients that we have in this pan, they're common to a lot of the dishes that we eat, even here in Hawaii. So be creative, and yeah, absolutely utilize the herbs that are your favorite. Totally up to you. Okay, so I'm going to do the garlic next and get that in. And it's up to you. I'm just going to smash it, as I often do, just to crush it a little bit to start. That aids me in the chopping process. So you can see I can honestly throw it in there like that, but I'm going to give it a couple chops across. And I like a little bit of texture to it, so I don't want to mince it too small. And in that would go. And we'll stir that up. And you could salt or season it at any time. We've got the allspice here. So I'm going to sprinkle this around and let it sort of infuse as it's cooking. I can hit it with a little bit of the salt and pepper just to start. And as was mentioned earlier, if you're staying away from sodium, you can just eliminate it. There's going to be a lot of flavor here already. So the salinity, the salt may be something that you don't necessarily need. The chilies I'm going to throw in just to get that heat going a little bit. And then stir. So you'll see the moisture coming out of the vegetables. So we're starting to get that little bit of moisture on the bottom, which is great. The hamburger is about halfway cooked. Now that there is some moisture, I can turn the heat up because I want to actually reduce that. It depends on the amount of liquid that you'd like, but when we do the filling and we're stuffing something, we don't want it to be too runny. It could create a problem for us later, spilling out onto the pan.
Okay, we got the answer for the ocean saltine.
Oh, okay. Great.
It's 3.5% salt concentration.
That sounds about right.
What does that equal to? How many tablespoons do you think?
Or depends on the amount of water. Your best bet is to go by taste. So if you've never swam in the ocean, whoever asked that question, then you're going to have to stay after school. It's living in Hawaii. But I like for this gallon here, I put in about 2 tablespoons, and this was almost a full gallon of water. So that was the taste that, or the amount that went into the taste that I tasted. So that worked out good. And now I'm going to add the tomato, diced, canned, and I don't know. I guess it's because I grew up with it, but you look at these beautiful canned tomato products today. I love the fresh as well. Great, but you've got them picked at the peak of ripeness. This one has some peppers, the garlic, some herbs in it. So it's just perfect for this particular dish. And so easy. And they were on sales like 5 cans for $5 or $5.50. And then I bought a fresh tomato and it was, they're like $2 a piece and it's not even as much. So maybe it's just growing up in an economically conscious family. But up
Now,
to you.
Yvonne is, if you are using tofu, at what point do you add it? Would it be about this time?
Great question, Yvonne. What I would say for the tofu, and this one's medium firm, so I would not go any softer than that. Medium firm to firm, extra firm. Different brands have different names, but because it doesn't need to be cooked or anything, I would drain the liquid. I would set it aside, and it would be the last thing that I put in at about the point in which you're going to put the fresh herbs in, because all it has to do is be warmed up and it'll absorb the flavors of the dish that we're creating really, really nicely. So it's one of the last things that goes in. Okay, so now this I just need to let reduce. I'm going to cut my mint. I've already got my parsley chopped. So half will go on fresh at the end, half will go in the dish. So I'm going to put some there. Take this mint, nice and fresh. And these are mostly tops. I had a nice bunch that I got. I just cut the tops off. So the stems are nice and tender. And I'm going to use those as well. I just want to, bunch it all up. Anytime you're chopping something fine and then throwing it into a dish, you can bunch them up a little bit. Keep them close together. Smells great already. And then I'm just slicing it carefully and as thin as possible for the first few cuts as we get going. Because what that does is it almost does all of the cutting for me the first time through, as opposed to spreading them all out on the table and then chopping this way and then that way. It takes a little bit longer. So bunching them up, slicing it as thin as you can on the first pass. And then because these cuts are running this way, I usually come back and maybe do one pass this direction all the way through, bunch them up, maybe once more. And that's it. Now keep in mind, mint and basil and some herbs like that will tend to blacken really quickly after they're chopped. So you don't want to do that too far ahead of time. It's always best to try to do your fresh herbs last minute if possible. So this would be my topping. I'm going to blend those together, set them aside, and then I can add the mint. You can see that moisture is reducing and evaporating. If you wanted to save that liquid as opposed to reducing it because your hamburger's already cooked or you're adding tofu, you could take a cracker crumb or a little bit of breadcrumbs if you don't mind eating carbohydrates, and just sprinkle them in right here. So if I had like 3 or 4 saltines and just crumbled them up, sprinkled them in, they would soak up all of that juice. I think I've talked to I talked to most of my classes, but I may have mentioned it in this class as well. But that's one of the tricks to a chili or any soup that cooks meat or stew that might have a little bit of fat on top. For what we're doing, we try to normally take it all off. But if you do have just that little layer across the top, a little bit of breadcrumbs or a little cracker crumbs sprinkled on top will absorb it. And then you stir it in. The ground up crumbs look like ground beef and it just absorbs it. So as opposed to removing something and reducing the quantity of what we have, it actually increases the quantity of what we have and it keeps everything inside. So a little restaurant trick to get an extra bowl of chili out of a batch that you're making. So at home, maybe you're not watching your food cost, but well, maybe you are today, but in the restaurant, you certainly are. Okay, so I'm going to just let this reduce, and you can see hopefully how colorful it is. Oh, how beautiful it looks. Very aromatic with the allspice coming through. And I can taste the liquid just to make sure that the flavor is there. Yep. And we've been working a lot with cumin and coriander and some of the different spices from this region. And I think this dish would be totally suitable for it. As I mentioned earlier as well, it would be perfect to cube up some of the eggplant and throw it in here. You don't necessarily have to stuff it and fill it. Okay. So I'm gonna throw this in really quick. While that's running, now we can move to doing the stuffing portion. So I have some here that's already cooked. I knew this would take a little bit longer. We're right on time, more or less. But I have this filling that's already done. It's already reduced. It's the consistency that I want. So you can see most of that liquid has evaporated. And we just have this nice sort of ground meat and vegetable mixture that will go into the center. Any other questions at the moment?
No, not at the moment, but everything looks great, colorful.
Yeah, I didn't know if anyone would tune in for eggplant. So thank you if you did as we wind down. And then you may be familiar with a dish called moussaka. I mean, there's a lot. Eggplant's very prominently used throughout Greece, Turkey, the Mediterranean. Moussaka is basically like a lasagna, but instead of pasta, you use sliced eggplant. So it's done basically the same way with a large eggplant, or even the Japanese style could be sliced in strips about a 1/4 inch thick, maybe up to 1/2 inch thick. And then they are soaked and layered in a casserole, just like you would be making lasagna. And we made lasagna for this class, I believe, for the show once or twice. But this filling would be perfect for that as well. This would actually make a nice regular lasagna filling. So I'm just sort of, I tend to like spread it out a little bit. The center's nice and tender, but I want it to hold the filling, or as much filling as I can get. And I'm going to just load it up. And if you wanted to put a little sprinkle of low-fat cheese on top or something like that, you certainly could do it. But this still has a lot of that moisture in there. It looks beautiful. That's it for that one. And then this is coming along. You can see how quickly all of that moisture evaporates. And then keep in mind, we were throwing in, I throw in a little extra. I don't need the water. It had that canned tomato juice. And most of it's going away now. But we're pulling the moisture that's out of that fresh tomato, pulling the moisture out of those vegetables. And because it was a lean ground beef, 90% lean, there's not a lot of fat in here. So this is about very close to where we want it to be.
So Chef, Bev wanted to know, you didn't take any of the inside of the eggplant out in order to stuff the filling, right? I didn't see that.
No, I did not. You didn't have to. And if you're doing a large one, I suppose you could. But if you're scoring it, soaking it, and then roasting it, it kind of caves in a little bit. But if you wanted to scoop it out, that would be fine. You could scoop it out and cube it. I mean, there's just so many different approaches that you could do to this particular dish. So we have fresh herbs left. This is, I'm going to save for the garnish. We've already got some inside. I've got one that's about done in the oven when I pull that out. I'd like to put fresh herbs on top when I plate it. So I want to make sure that I save that for it. Now this is ready to go in the oven. And they also have the smaller eggplants. You might be growing them at home. Someone had just donated some that would have been perfect. They're about the size of a baseball, a little light bulb shape though. Would have been perfect for one serving per person. So the longer ones like this, if you want to split them before you stuff them, that would be fine because it might be a little harder to transfer. We'll find out here in a minute, transferring these long ones onto a plate. So if you want to portion it in advance, you could do that as well.
So you're going to bake them right now, is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So here, this
Okay.
one, this was the one that we had soaked earlier, dried, and then it's not brown enough yet, but I only have 2 shells in the oven. So I'm going to take that out.
Lonnie at Honolulu, she found Zaatar, Zaatar spice by McCormick. Would it be good for this recipe?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure what's in it, but I would say go for it. Give it a try. If you like the flavor of that spice, that might work perfectly. So even though some of the ones that we made as we were just rounding out our trip through the Mediterranean, I'm shutting that off now so it can just settle down. I want to keep a little bit of juice there. I don't want it to be too dry. But any of those spice blends or your favorite spice blend that you might have at home, whether it's dehydrated garlic, paprika was a predominant spice in most of the travels that we did through Latin America, even across into the Mediterranean. So some paprika in this dish would be great. So I would say go for it. Be creative. If it's a spice blend that you like, you're probably going to like it in here.
I have a comment from Laureen. She is, and the question is a little off the topic, but her mother used to make eggplant parmesan, and her eggplant was always firm and not the usual eggplant mush. Do you know how she kept it firm?
Yeah, I would guess it was the larger ones, or you could even do it with this one. A little bit thicker sliced. I wouldn't soak it. Just slice it. Those usually just breaded, right? So it's flour, egg wash, and then breadcrumbs. A lot of times if it's Parmesan, it should have breadcrumbs and Parmesan cheese mixed together for the breading, or you could just do the parm afterwards, but a little thicker slice for one. And then well, we're frying, I guess. Normally that's a fried dish. And then your oil you want to be 375 to 400. So if it's cooked fast, and it's not soaked, then it should stay nice and crisp. Plus you'll have that outer skin that's crusted up nicely from the frying process. So an air fryer would probably work. And if you watch the show, what's one thing we've done a lot of is taking the traditionally fried items and then breading them or whatever. We got meat jun coming up and a couple other things. And then just lightly spraying it with a healthy fat and then using an air fryer. And that crisps it up. It's not the same exactly as deep frying, obviously, but it's a really close technique. Our karaage came out great. So that's one way to do it. A little healthier version. So I'm going to leave these whole. I'll just set that here. A little hot. Then I've got some of my fresh herbs that I can put on top. And as I mentioned earlier, you could, of course, cut that prior to baking it. And then I have a tiny bit of sauce. My wife scolded me earlier for bringing this in. But if you want it a little spicier, if you have a favorite hot sauce like sriracha or maybe Tabasco or whatever it is you like, this is a perfect dish for like a nice hot sauce. So I'm going to put one of our favorites on here. And this one's about gone. And this could be served with a little bit of salad. It could be served with almost anything. It's sort of a meal in and of itself. And I'm going to put a few drops around the plate, make it look pretty. I'm almost out. Nicely done. Not too hot, a little bit of sweet, even barbecue sauce. I mean, get creative. If you don't have tomato paste, just use ketchup at home. You don't have to necessarily use every single ingredient, go to the store and spend a bunch of money. You might even be able to cut the peppers and the onions out of this dish if you were to buy the canned tomato that has the pepper, the onion, and the garlic in it already. So That's basically the dish. And, you know, the aromas are really good. The flavor's nice. I know it's eggplant. If you prefer zucchini or some other type of thing, stuffed cabbage leaf, just keep in mind this particular filling is super versatile. It can be vegetarian, it can be the ground beef, or it could be tofu, or it could be pork, or excuse me, well, pork, probably not. We don't do a lot of pork here, but the chicken or the turkey would work great for that as well. So super versatile filling. Get a good hot sauce to put on top of it, fresh herbs, your herbs of choice, the cilantro, whatever you like, and you got a nice, healthy little meal.
We do have a couple of questions regarding the hot sauce. Why didn't you put the hot sauce in while you were cooking?
You know, it's like a good extra virgin olive oil, or some dressings and items. There's certain things that you certainly could have put it in, but I had those chili flakes, or in my case, the bird chilies, to give a little heat into that. This particular sauce has like a little bit of acidity to it. So it's got some lemon juice or vinegar. And when you cook vinegar or anything that has a little acidity to it, it dissipates. So, I mean, I use Tabasco a lot, for example, and it's a little bit more acidic than my wife likes. But if you were to cook with Tabasco, you'd get the flavor, but you'd lose the acidity. So a lot of times dressings, hot sauces and things like that, you want to keep that freshness, and you want the taste of the sauce to come through and complement the item that you're eating. So you could put it in, but you would just lose certain elements to it. So plus it's a lot of your sauces are a little bit more expensive. If you're spending $8 on a bottle of hot sauce and you're putting 2 or 3 tablespoons in there, you know, you might be putting $1.50 worth of hot sauce into your mix, whereas you could just put a teaspoon on the top of the dish that you're serving and make it last. So like I said, I got scolding from Alice she's in Texas right now, but she saw that I brought this in. And she was,
we do have 2 people, Janice and Patty, who wants to know the name of your hot sauce.
oh, this one's bottle fed. It's called Bottle Fed. It's not available right now. It's actually one of our viewers starting a business and sent us a sample for some feedback, and it's one of our favorites. So I'm sure it'll be out there sometime in the near future. But there's a lot of really good ones. There's some great local ones that we use as well. The hot sauce business is crazy. There's just literally thousands of them in a wide range of spice. So if you don't like the heat necessarily, there's a lot of really flavorful ones that can add and complement the dishes that you cook, but don't necessarily have to add the heat, the real spicy hotness. I don't like hot. I prefer to taste the food. I want a little bit of flavor, but I don't want a ton of heat.
Now, Karen wants to know, can we use the frozen mixed peppers?
Frozen mixed peppers. Oh, absolutely. Even the canned diced red pimentos, any of those convenience products, I think, are perfectly fine to use. Absolutely.
Well, okay, Ingrid, this is a question for you. Chef Dan, do you put hot sauce on ice cream?
On ice cream?
Yes.
I think about that. I don't believe I ever have. I put some strange things on ice cream. I find like saffron syrup or balsamic syrup works nicely, but I've not tried that. That would be an interesting mix. So I'm guessing, has Ingrid tried that? Probably. Now you've got the deep fried ice cream. So deep fried ice cream with some hot sauce, that would probably be really tasty. I'll have to give it a try. I'll get back to you.
In that za'atar sauce or spice, it has roasted sesame seeds.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Very nice.
And that was the last.
Even if you wanted to garnish this and make it a little bit more Hawaiian style flavored, right? A little bit more of the Asian flavor. You could use a little sesame oil in here to get that flavor. And then just look at this particular dish as a framework for lots of different things. So yeah, get creative. That's what we're really trying to do, is get back to the basics, what methods are we using? Keep it simple, but make it flavorful and nice and healthy.
So Ingrid said she was just joking with you, chef, because you like hot sauce.
I would, but it sounds kind of good in a way, right? So, I mean, like I was saying with the saffron and the vinegar, what I teach students is we'll always take like a very inexpensive vinegar. We'll put it in a sauce pot like this, maybe a cup or two, a pinch of saffron or a chili flake or something, and a tablespoon of sugar, and we reduce it down till it's a syrup. And it becomes sweet, but also tart. And then we use that on ice cream, and we use it on different desserts. So it adds like a tart, tangy flavor. So you got the wheels turning.
Yeah, in fact, a viewer just said he's got some blueberry vinegar to be used with ice cream.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very, very popular. So, a lot of people are most familiar with like the aged balsamic vinegar, which is a long-term evaporation reduction, really. So a lot of those are aged 10, 12, 15 years or more, and they're slowly reducing and thickening over time in different barrels, different types of wood casks. But you can take an inexpensive vinegar, throw in a blueberry, and reduce it with a teaspoon of sugar, a little sugar substitute to give it some sweetness, and it'll become a syrup. And you can use it on ice cream and different things like that. So we just tried some maple syrup that was aged in bourbon casks. And I know Jackie Malley likes one that's got cinnamon and vanilla, I think, the two things that are in this type of maple syrup. So the sky's the limit. Get creative, you name it. I mean, the world's on hyper creative drive right now, it seems like. So you never know when you might stumble across something that would be really delicious.
I just have one more comment from a viewer. What are you going to do with the large pan of filling?
Come on down. Anyone in Kaneohe? Usually I go and I deliver some to Jackie Malley's house every Thursday, and then Jackie Boland would normally come by. I think she's on the Big Island right now. So I'm not sure. This one will probably go into the freezer, and I'll take a little bit home because I'm a bachelor for the weekend. And then we'll use it next week in the lunch menu for the kids here on campus. And this does freeze perfectly well, so absolutely no problem there. And let me pull out the one that should be about done. Oh yeah, there you go. You can see it crackling. Nice and hot. Those juices have soaked into the eggplant there. It's a perfect little vessel. Now you just dish it up and you can serve it and you're good to go. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate it very much. I didn't know, like I said, whether or not folks would tune in for eggplant, but it is a very tasty dish, and we hope you experiment a little bit with it at home.
Mahalo, chef, and the AARP Hawaii volunteers, and most importantly, you folks at home. See you next week for Mediterranean style mahi-mahi with wilted greens and mushrooms. Have a good evening. Aloha, ahui ho.
Aloha, everyone.